Hi, I'm Kristen and this is Scrap Fabric Love. Today I'm doing the second of my big quilt block series. Today we're doing quarter log cabin block. So like this. So it's 20 inches square, quite large. We're using, just like the last block that I did last week, which was like a rail fence variation. This one, we're also going to use 2 widths of strips, kind of 3, but I'll explain that later. But it's still going to be simple. It's still going to be beginner friendly. And because the blocks are so big, you can put together a quilt really quickly. So I'm going to show you me making 4 at a time, because although there are lots of bits to each block, more bits probably than the one from last week, it does go faster if you chain piece them and do them one after the other. And also with a quarter log cabin, there's a hint, you kind of need 4 to make a whole. So you don't have to lay them out like that. So for example, you could make a baby quilt with 4 of these blocks and like a border of your choice kind of thing. And you could probably set them out in the way you would traditionally see a log cabin come together. But you could also pivot them if you were doing more blocks and make something that's not, that doesn't fit that 4 quadrant. But anyways, we're going to show you how to make them 4 at a time. So this block is a great standalone block for whipping up a quilt quickly. But it also is part of the Big Blocks Quilt Along that I'm doing with some of my subscribers who were keen to do another quilt along. We had a little poll. Some people wanted to, some people didn't. Anyway, so the sign up link for that is in the description. You can still sign up even if you're watching this months in the future, and you will get the emails with the info, and you can follow along with these 3 big block videos that I'm doing. So the one from last week, this one, and the one next week, and we'll put them all together into a quilt top in week 4. But this block, you can also just do on its own and make a quilt. Same with last week, same with next week. So it's kind of like 4 quilt options in the 3 videos is the kind of idea. So let's get going making the quarter log cabin block. Okay guys, so here is the measurements. It looks like a lot of pieces, but don't worry, this is enough for 4 blocks. So that's why it looks like so much. I'm gonna chain piece 4 in a row, because with a quarter log cabin, you would normally put them together in groups of 4. And for the quilt along, we're doing 4. We're not putting them together, but we're still doing 4. So that's what I'm doing. So you start off with a 4.5 inch square. If you're doing 1 block, you only need 1 of these. But if you're doing 4, then you'd need the same. For mine, I'm doing the same color for all of these starting blocks. You don't have to, but I just think it's gonna, the quilt I'm looking to make is gonna be sort of busy anyway. So I wanna put some similarities in some places just to make it easier to look at. Hopefully it'll make sense when it comes together. But anyway, so I'm doing 4 of the same fabric, 4.5 inch squares. So that's the first one. And then the rest of this is basically made up of 6 pairs. So the way this block works is that we start by making a unit of the 2 4.5 inch blocks. The one is the white that I started with, and the other one is the pink. But then there's a seam allowance that makes those 2 measurements a little bit smaller, because the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So then when we add our next bit of pair 1, which is the longer pink strip, it's 8.5 inches long, but it's the same width as the square, so the 4.5 inches. Then we're stepping up each pair, so it's got to be the same length as the unit before, but I'm changing the strip width. So some of them are 2.5 inches wide and some of them are 4.5 inches wide. All of these measurements are in this graphic here, which you can pause, or in the written blog post that I have on my website, and the link is in the description box of this video. You will also find there this graphic of kind of the sewing order for the strips, if that's easier for you to digest. So basically you're joining 1 to 2, and then 3 gets joined to 1 to 2, and then 4 gets joined to 2 and 3, if that makes sense in that way. Hopefully it does. I was originally talking over this bit here with all the strips, telling you the exact measurements of all the pairs, but I found watching it back that it was easier to see in that graphic form. So that's why I made that. So either pause the video or go find that link in the description. So I did have some repeating fabrics in the strips of my block, but for the most part, the strips in the middle were different kind of fabrics in the family of the dots that are in that polka dot fabric I started with. But then for the final two pairs, I decided to change it up a bit. So pair 5, I used a variety of whites in order to just give a little, what do they call it, breathing room, or make it easier to digest all the colors because there's a bit more space. And for the final pair, pair 6, I'm using a super dark purple, which is quite a bit darker really than the other colors in the block, but I think it still goes. And the reason for it being darker is to just give a bit of definition to the edge of these blocks, which I think looks nice a lot of the time. It's not necessary. You don't have to do it every time you do this kind of block. But for the quilt along layout, where these blocks will not be sitting together, they'll be in the four corners of the quilt. Having this definition is going to give a bit of shape to the quilt. So that's why I'm using that dark purple. The other thing that I've done just to make my life in trimming this block much easier, although I've given you the measurements in the grid, or in the graphic, sorry, of these strips being 2.5 inch wide. That is for experienced sewers whose 1/4 inch seam is impeccable and pressing methods are impeccable. And so everything just comes out perfectly every time. That's not me. So I cut these strips at 3 inches wide, and I just cut them at half width of fabric. So they're all sort of 20 inches long and 3 inches wide. And that is to make my life easier when I trim the block down to 20 inches. So if you are a beginner and you think that would help, feel free to do that as well. It's just sometimes easier to add a little bit more that you're going to trim off than it is to stress about it being not quite as big as you wanted it to be. So we would do one at a time. One, and then one, right? And we'd be putting these together, right sides together. We put all 4 of them through. And then when we get them around the other way, this one would go here. Okay, and so and then when we come to the next pair, that's the same one. When we come to the next pair, it goes here and then along here. But we're gonna chain piece it to make it that little bit faster because it is a lot of pieces. If that's getting too complicated, you can do one block at a time and just lay out your block like I'm doing here with the pairs, and then you can pull from it like that. So you don't have to chain piece it, but if you're looking for a way to make it faster, that's what I'm going to do with this. So we start, as I said, with all of our 4.5 inch squares. So the ones you're starting with, mine are the white ones, and then the colored ones, whatever your strips are for pair 1, which is the 2 that go around your starting square. And then I'm just feeding all 4 of those through the machine. Obviously, if you're doing 8, 10, 12, whatever blocks, you could be chain piecing them all if you've cut them all out. But I just did 4 at a time because I only need 4 for the quilt along. You won't see it in the video, but I am pressing these units each time I've sewn. So I'm trimming them off, taking them to the pressing mat before I add the next strip to the side. Another little beginner tip that was useful for me, which I still do, is to cut these strips a little bit longer than they need to be so that I've got something to trim at the end and I'm never cut short. When I first started, I was always ending up with blocks that were just a little bit smaller than they were supposed to be, which is really annoying. Now, in this case, this method did get me into a little bit of a boo-boo, which I'll tell you about in just a second in the video. But anyway, that is a little tip to just cut it a little bit longer and you'll save yourselves a headache. Okay, so I've just realized that I made a boo-boo on what I was intending to do. I put the extra end of my strips here on the wrong end. It should have been kind of turned around. So I should have had this, let me see if I can find a way to show you. So I should have had this strip here that's underneath, can you see it? Flip the other way with the straight edge lined up with the fabric that's the same color as it. And then sewn my 1/4 inch down here, and then I would have had this selvage tail here hanging off this end. So then I don't have to trim anything because this is going to be the outside of the block here. So if the extra ends are here and here, then I don't have to trim anything until I trim the whole block. Now I've given myself a job where I have to trim these little tails off. It's not a big deal, and I've noticed it on the first pair, so that's fine. So just don't do what I did if you're cutting your strips a little bit too long. If you're cutting them to the exact size, it doesn't make any difference. So, okay, so I am going to press this one, trim those, and we'll come back and do pair 3. Okay, I'm back, boo-boo fixed. We all do these things, right? So this unit at this point should be 8.5 by 8.5 inch squared, okay? And then we're gonna add our next pair. So now I'm gonna move these off just a second to get the top of each of these pairs. I'll put this longer one over here. Okay, so there's my 4. And now I do have choices in terms of what I want to put next to what. So I've got 2 orange and 2 pinks, and then these are all slightly different. So I think I probably want to put that with that. And this is just what looks good to me, okay? There's no right or wrong here. I'm going to pair that one with that. And okay, so this is going to be my order. So now I can just put them here. Okay, and so now I want to go along the side where I'm crossing the seam that's the same 2 fabrics, okay? Because the short one always goes on the same side, the long one always goes on the other side. And we're going up this way, right? So I'm going to go from here to here, and I'm going to make sure that I line my straight edge up on this side so that any little extra I have is down here, because that's where it should have been before. So we remember this time. I've sped up a good deal of the sewing in this video, as I often do, because it seems a little bit repetitive. But if you really want to watch it at regular speed, you can use the little cog beside the description of the video. That's the settings symbol, and you can speed up or slow down anyone's video that you want to. So if you don't like fast forwards, that is always an option for you. And this now is adding the long side of pair 2 to the other side of the block. So we're always matching the 2 fabrics that are the same or similar, depending how you've chosen to do it. And we're always going up in the same direction. So the 2 sides of your white starting square, if it's white like mine, will be unsewn. There's no strips on that. We just keep building up, and the block gets bigger and bigger and bigger towards one corner, if that makes sense. So we've got square, pair 1, pair 2. Okay, so I have them all lined up with my 2 matching seams here, and I'm going to decide what's going next. So I just need the short strip of the pair, so that can go back over here. Short one, short one, and these ones just happen to be, they're actually 2 different shades of greens and 2 different shades of purples, so that's fine. Right, let me just make sure that was the short one. Yeah, okay. So what do I like next to what? So I think maybe green with that. What's this one? Green with this one. Do I want to do that? Or do I want to put a purple over here? And a green here. Here. Yeah, okay. Right. So this may just decide in my order. So I think I'm going to go purple, green, and what have I got? Yeah, that was green. This one was green, and that one was purple. Oh, wow. Cool. Right. So let's get going with pair 3. Hopefully the way this block comes together is making sense. The biggest advice in terms of getting it to go quickly is to keep your pairs together and like stacked in an order that makes sense for you, which is what I'm doing. And then I'm kind of ordering the ones I want to add each time. Okay, so here I am after pair 3, about to do pair 4. So again, I've got some choosing in terms of just what color goes with what color. So let me get the short ones again. Long one goes back over there. Okay, so I'm good there. Right, so I'm gonna just fan these out a bit so I can see the colors I'm working with. Okay, so you could have the orange and you're on the bottom. You've already got orange. You could have pink or blue. Let's see, you've got lots of dots. So maybe you have this one. And you've already got pink, so you could have that one. And then you could be here. Yep, that's fine. Okay. So that's me all organized. And now I can start on pair 4. So the short side of pair 4 goes to the side with the 2 that meet each other that are the same color. Let's go. If I was making a whole quilt of this block, and I kind of wanted them to be a lot of the same colors, then I might consider, rather than cutting each strip or each pair for each quarter block, I might consider keeping the strips long and just chain piecing without having the separate strips. But I don't want to complicate things for you if you are just starting out. But that's just an idea for anyone who's thinking they just want to whip through some sort of a quilt all in one go. If you are looking for how many blocks you need in order to make a quilt of a particular size with this block, that is also in the blog post on my website. Same link as before. So down in the description box of the video. Okay, so now we've done the initial square, pair 1, pair 2, pair 3, pair 4. And now we just have 5 and 6 left. And now, because all of mine are whites for pair 5 and purples for pair 6, and they're pretty much all the same. There's a little bit of variety in the white, but it doesn't really matter. I don't have to choose. I can just stack up the short ones and the long ones, and I'm good to go. As I said, I went with these white strips and then the purple strips to kind of break things up with these quilt blocks. I do think it does look nice to have something a little darker or a little different on the edge of the blocks. But I'm basically doing it for me because I don't think I'm going to be adding sashing to my finished quilt. And so the purple and the white is kind of, just going to break things up a little bit. If you were thinking of doing either a whole quarter log cabin block with sashing or the quilt along quilt with sashing, then you probably don't need to worry about having a kind of separation pair of fabrics, if you know what I mean. You can just continue on your merry way with your scrappy strips and then decide how you want to frame it with your sashing. And if you're wondering about sashing, I will talk about it in the 4th video. So after the 3 big blocks are done, I'm going to do one where I put these blocks all together, and I'll talk about it then. And because I made that outer strip a little bit wider and I have my tails coming off the edges of my block, it was much easier to trim up than when I did the practice one with the proper width last strip. So you don't have to do it that way. You can cut all your strips to exactly the size and the measurements, and it should work out. But for me, it's easier to just err on the side of caution and give myself these little tails. And then I'm using this big 20.5 inch ruler, but I'm only cutting it to 20 inches square, so it doesn't need the whole size of the ruler. And I did get questions from the block last week. No, you don't need to have this ruler. You can just use the lines on your cutting mat and whatever ruler you have. This is just a nice to have. This is not required to make the block or to make any block. They are expensive. I will put a link in the description because anytime I use something, I tend to get asked, and that's where you will find it. But absolutely not a requirement. And apologies that my head is in the way of all this cutting. Terrible camera work. Now, the really nice thing about the quarter log cabin blocks is that you can lay them out lots of different ways, as I said at the beginning, and they can look completely different. So you can have a play around with your blocks when you're done and see how you like them. So I hope you enjoyed that. I really liked how mine turned out, and I'm getting excited now to put the whole quilt together with the 3 blocks, but we need next week first. If you do want to follow along in more of a quilt along fashion, just sign up in the email. It's free. And if you are doing that, please do tag me if you're sharing anywhere. I'm at Scrap Fabric Love. If you are using Instagram, you can use the hashtag Scrap Fabric Love Sew Along. I haven't posted on there yet myself, but I will do because I'm telling you. I'm notorious for not checking my Instagram super often, but I'll go on it and I'll post something, and hopefully some of you guys will too. If you've not subscribed to the channel already, it'd be great if you'd consider it. And in any case, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about what you thought of this block. I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for spending time with me. Bye.